back to Salem. You mentioned this mental asylum, which is, I think, just as interesting and crazy as a story as Salem. So can you walk us through what that place was, and what your experiences were with it?
Yeah. So conveniently, right where I was living, right on Putnam Lane, right across the street from the Putnam House. If you now you can kind of see it a little bit better, but it was always from my street, just kind of just over the tree line. You would see this huge giant castle, almost like like a horror movie or some type of cartoon.
Right.
It just loomed over this high castle was just up on a hill that just loomed over the whole town. And that was this Danvers State Hospital. And I was born in 79. So when I was old enough to care about the hospital, I was at the rebellious age where I would trek through the woods with my friends, a few, and we'd go up the hill and we would go into this abandoned hospital. At the time, one wing of this hospital was actually closed, but the other half was actually still functional and they still had people in there. Crazy. But this hospital has such a dark history. Now, the lobotomy was invented in Europe years and years and years ago, but the first lobotomies that were kind of presented or executed in the United States were at Danvers State Hospital.
Oh, wow.
So there is definitely, all the stuff that you've ever seen in movies or read about in books where I think, where people doctors started messing around and trying to, shock therapy or all that stuff happened there. And if you go up there, there's so many unmarked graves that just are littered all over the property that are hidden still to this day. They turned that hospital now into in the 90s, they turned it into like a condo, and they built off of it and left and right. So they expanded it, and it's a really nice area. But if you drive up there, the hospital is still intact and it's refurbished.
Wow.
But it's for condo use. But the unmarked graves are still there. There's like these small little graves with numbers on them, and you could tell that they just pretty much, had an office somewhere where there was a file cabinet full of these numbers of which, represented people. And now that, kids have looted them and that hospital's gone, they're just like unmarked in the ground. And it's just a really sad thing. And another really when I was like a little kid, you'd always watch, you'd think that like the Russians were going to nuke us, or you grew up watching like movies like the Red Dawn and all that stuff. And you're always like, as a little G.I. Joe kind of kid, you'd always say to yourself, like, okay, like if I had to save my family, this is what I would do.
Go to that.
And so the Danvers State Hospital, I didn't know how far it was until I got older, but underneath the hospital, there are underground passages that go 10 miles in either direction.
What? To
different surrounding towns where they would transport psychiatric patients underground from basically Danvers to Salem to I think Beverly. I don't know. I'd have to look at it again, but I can't remember the landscape. But I always used to say as a kid, like if I could just climb down this hole, there's miles and miles and miles of protected underground bomb shelter that that I have here.
That's crazy. I wonder how bad these patients had to have been to make them go through tunnels. Like why have to do the tunnel transportation?
I don't know. Maybe it was just a direct stream of, who knows, you could have the next Charlie Manson underground.
True.
There was like before the hospital closed, and actually I'll talk really quickly about how it closed. They transported one of my friends who recorded actually the first Unearthed demo, Above the Fall of Man, demo tape. His name's Dickie Durkee. Used to work there. And his whole job was he would take some of the patients into the showers and he would just hum and sing songs or whatever while they showered to keep them kind of at ease. And he would just take care. He's a good person, took care of them. And I heard, stories and rumors once that there was a patient who escaped. And it was such a big hospital, and he escaped inside the building. So one of the wings was shut off. They got into the other wing, and they spent like a week trying to find this person. And this person's obsession was to take a needle and just literally prick their skin. You know how when you prick your skin real quick, there's like a little pool of blood that kind of fills up, and you just see it. You know what I'm saying? It's a little ball that's in a unique place. That was his obsession. It's just to sit there and pick at his hand or pick at his whatever. And he found a mirror. and he basically did it in a week. He was just pricking his whole body and just doing that with a pin.
Wow.
For weeks, and then they obviously took him back to where he had to go, and it's like crazy stuff. But the hospital, when it closed down, they transported a lot of the patients to another hospital. But other patients were kind of just left to their own devices, and literally they walked along the Ipswich River. So by that time, when I moved onto the Ipswich River, I remember there was a summer, like from 1988 or 1989, I can't remember. But my mother was like, "You're not allowed to go down to the Ipswich River," because we used to, me and my buddy used to go down there and throw rocks at things and find for some reason there's always porn under rocks. I don't know why that existed in the 80s, but that was a big thing in our neighborhood. Like I actually Andy Williams from Every Time I Die has a great, like, he did some stand-up comedy and he told this great joke once. Really? It's like, what are the porn industry? Is that how they get kids to Gateway? They just put free samples under rocks in every town. It's like this, his bit was hilarious. But
I had no idea he did comedy before wrestling.
At that time there's basically insane people living at the Ipswich River, and I couldn't go play down there because my mother was obviously scared I was going to get stabbed or molested or something.
Yeah, I mean, rightfully so. I don't know what I'd do. My kids wouldn't be allowed out. That's insane. I mean, I read about this place that at one point they were taking in so many people. They had over 2,000 people, and they didn't have enough clothes. So there was just naked, crazy patients roaming the land.
This is the hospital?
This is the hospital, yeah.
Damn, if I had a time machine, we could have partied.
It's like the Alcatraz of
imagine doing a show there.
Oh man, it would be so sick. They're already ready for the pit.
Oh man, I'm trying to think. There was an old punk band that did a great show at an insane asylum. I can't remember.
That's great. That's great.
70s or 80s,
what's really crazy is that, so there's this town. I was friends with. I don't know if this is bullshit or not, but I'm just gonna say it.
Perfect.
There's so when you're at the top of the hospital, there's this creepy staircase that goes down, and it leads you to this like old house. And at the time, this house, like, as growing up, this house looked like Freddy Krueger's house, legitimately, like just sitting there in a cornfield. Because just below the hospital is miles and miles and miles of corn, like a cornfield, and just beyond that is a halfway house for like teen boys. Me and my buddy used to call it the sexy boys home because these dudes would have their shirt off and they'd be lifting weights all day. I'm like, oh, were they just breeding sexy guys over here? It's crazy. But anyway, there was this haunted, creepy house.
Right.
And the urban legend was that the people who were building and demoing, because they put like other structures there, couldn't knock down the house. Like weird things were happening where like their engines would freeze, or this would happen, or that would happen. For one reason or another, they just couldn't knock this structure down, so they had to build over it. And when I showed it to my wife recently, she was like, yeah, it's kind of crazy that they built all this, like, these great, like, buildings, but they kept that house intact, because it's just kind of, it doesn't make sense where it is, but that's an urban legend. I don't know if that's weird or not. I love those places.
Oh yeah, I love seeing stuff like that, because like you were mentioning this mental institution being turned into condos, and I was reading about where people believe the witches were hanged, that supposed witches were hanged and buried, and at those places it's all like CVS and parking lots now.
Yeah,
it's just
that's all that stuff's gone. The creepiest place that, like, outside of my library, if you look up I think it's called the Peabody Library, even though it's in Danvers, that's a surrounding town. Mm-hmm. Sorry for my accent. It's not Peabody, but Peabody. It's like it's weird. It looks like they would hang people. There's a big, like, little river and this big old house, and I don't know. But yeah, most of the history is gone. But we still got the Old Settlers Church where they all congregated. Yeah. We still got Rebecca Nurse. We still have. You should look up Endicott Park sometime in Glen Magna. It's beautiful.
Okay.
We still have the Danvers State Hospital, the Old Settlers Grave, and there's a cool little memorial that they made at there's a soccer field right next to that church that has this like big like stone thing with all the people that died and a book opened. It's a cool little memorial.
That's interesting. You said earlier that a lot of weird stuff has happened in the area. Like, did you mean in modern times and stuff you've experienced, like whether it's whatever, who knows what, murders and stuff like that?
I mean, every town has their sense of, like, weird murders and dumb shit. But there was a teacher that was in Danvers High, and obviously these things are just, I wouldn't say it's a Danvers witchcraft kind of thing, but there's a teacher that was raped and murdered at school.
Oh, wow.
And killed at Danvers High about maybe 5 or 6 years after I graduated. And ironically, my wife, that was one of her roommates or good friends in college.
Oh, wow.
So it's a small world there. It was a brutal attack. And that kid, unfortunately, did what he did, and he went away for a long time. And I remember, I'll never forget that, like, there's a small little hill at my high school, and a kid broke his neck. They used to do this thing where they used to, like, water it up, and like some of the sports guys just like, slide down it like a slip and slide, and the kid broke his neck. So like, there's always these like unfortunate, like little things that would always happen in the town. But my personal, I told you this, when we were talking about this on the phone, but I had a friend, and my brother's 5 years older than me. We both played hockey through high school. There was this kid, and I won't name names, but his mother died when I was really little, and it was a really, really sad thing, and the whole town knew. And I was like, my brother and I used to go over to his house and play street hockey. Now, mind you, my brother, it's so weird. My brother had like all his friends group, and just so happens his friends group was also my friends group, because all the mothers had kids like 5 years away. So like all my brother's friends I was friends with their little brothers, and we all grew up.
That worked out.
It was always like, hey, take your brother to go play hockey, and all my friends will be there, and all his friends will be there. So anyway, now I went to this house all the time when I was a kid.
Right.
When I graduated high school and I was in college, and Unearth was just starting, and we just started touring, I met up with this girl at a bar before I left for tour. And this is a girl that I went to high school with, so I knew her and her older brother. And at the time, I was just super single and whatever, ready to mingle, whatever you want to call it. And I said to her, she asked me to hang out when I got back home, from tour, and I said sure. And I took this girl on a date. Now she sends me her address, and at this time I'm not in Danvers anymore, so I travel from Ipswich. I think I was there, and I drove to her house, and I drove to her house, and I was like, hey, like, I don't want to knock on your front door, because this is I used to play in your driveway as a kid. Is this still the so-and-so's house? And she started laughing. She's like, oh my God, you know them? Whoa. She's like, yes, I live in their house now. And I was like, okay, thank God. Because I thought I was, in my hometown, it's like, if I showed up to their door as a, 22-year-old kid, the parents would still recognize me.
Right.
Or at least his father, would recognize me, because I played varsity hockey and all that other stuff. So anyway, her and I started seeing each other. We dated a few times, and there was this one late night that she's just like, hey, listen, my father's gone. If you want to sleep over, it's late, blah, blah, blah. I don't want you to drive. And I was like, all right, cool. So I stayed at her house. And when I went into her house, the house was empty. We go upstairs, we make a drink. I go in the refrigerator. I saw a little like old school, like Little Miss Muffet, like weird, like in 70s type, like magnet on the fridge. And it was this kid's mom's name who passed away. And I said, oh, that's so crazy. And she's like, hey, I just want to let you know that like this house is haunted. We keep this up as a memory. This was left behind. And I want you to know that, like, cause you know her, you are going to be safe. But I think that, this house sometimes gets alive at night. And I just said, like I was just kind of like, I don't believe in ghosts, it's not my thing. Like, whatever, like, let's go to bed, So we went down to the basement where her room was. We fell asleep, and around 4 a.m. or 3:30 a.m., somewhere around that time, it was in the middle of the night. When I say, like, the house was electric, like, as she said, like, it sounded like a 250 pound man was throwing himself against the cabinets, slamming all the glasses in the cabinets, pushing tables, pushing chairs. I literally woke up and she said, see, like, she was like excited to show me. And I was just kind of like, are you sure your dad's not home? Because her dad was on a date. He wasn't going to like sleep at the house. It was a whole thing.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, I swear to God, he's not here. So I don't believe in ghosts. I want to see one. So I run up the stairs and I immediately flick on the light to the kitchen, and everything is in its perfect place. And the noise stopped the second I flicked the lights on. And that's the first time in my life where I was like, okay, there is energy. There is something. I don't know if it's ghosts or if it's like a replay in the world, but I finally experienced something that is like truly paranormal.
Do you think there's some weird relationship between the paranormal and electricity? I mean, you deal with like gear and stuff a lot, and I hear stories of things like that quite a bit.
So when I say electricity, I mean more so of like I believe that the room was electric, like in the sense like it was vibrant,
like
and it was I'm just using words to describe how alive it was at the time. Right. I don't think it has anything to do with like conductivity and, you know, voltage or anything like that. I just think that whether the earth is spinning and we're reliving a moment that was in the past,
right,
or in the future, I don't know what it is, but at the time I was like, damn, like if she knows who I am, which she does, and she's dead and she wants to communicate, then, you know, I was there and I was there for it. And mind you, it wasn't like she didn't pass away due to she passed away untimely, but it wasn't like a murder or a suicide. Right. She had cancer and it was like an unfortunate situation. And it wasn't anything like horrific that happened, you know, per se to her. So, you know, if you believe in the whole, you know, if it was a traumatic experience, the ghost lives on. But I think her leaving her child and her family behind might have been traumatic enough for that kind of situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I ask about the electricity stuff just because I'm skeptical of a lot of these things, although I think there's evil out there and there's good and there's things that happen I can't explain. But my first real experience with what might have been a ghost was my grandfather after he passed away. I was in Florida. And in the house my grandma and him lived in for 30 years and never experienced anything weird there. And it was my last morning there. Before, you know, after the funeral, going to go back to New York. And I wake up before sunrise and I'm sitting down in his like love seat where he used to chill and just kind of like saying goodbye to the house. And all of a sudden the ceiling fan starts clicking on and off above me. And it sounds weird, but the button was like making the sound like it was being pushed. And it's going higher, lower, medium, like that. That's weird. So I just started talking to my grandfather as if it was him. It was the only thing that made sense, you know? And after that, I'm like, I think it's possible that something on the other side can communicate with us. It's kind of like I don't know if you ever watched Twin Peaks, but the latest season that Lynch did seemed like that's what he was talking about. There's forces that can move through electricity to mess with this world.